You hear the sound before anything else. A dense roar pressed into the walls around you. It's not celebration. It's pressure. Heat builds under the layers of fabric on your skin. Your grip tightens against the armrest as the crown sinks into your scalp. The metal is cold at first, then heavy. You try to adjust your breath, but the air feels rigid. Light floods your vision as you rise. Faces blur into a single mass. They watch every movement. You register it fast. This moment is not freedom. It is acquisition. You have not been elevated. You have been reclassified. And here is the twist. The crown does not protect you. It marks you as a controlled resource. That is the beginning of your new life. If you want more dark history like this, hit subscribe. The system that now surrounds you predates your birth. It operates without pause. Royal marriages are state mechanisms, not personal choices. Every queen is an exchange unit in a larger structure. Kingdoms negotiate these women like strategic assets. Their value lies in alliances, heirs, and compliance. Nothing else matters. The palace enforces that rule with absolute consistency. You feel that truth within minutes of the coronation. From childhood, your fate was mapped through contract drafts and diplomatic letters. Royal daughters never existed as individuals. They were components of international policy. A girl's age did not limit the discussions. 5 years old, 6 years old, 12 years old. It made no difference. Suitors were evaluated. Territories were weighed. Fertility potential was recorded. Royal fathers treated daughters as collateral for treaties that strengthened borders or secured armies. Margaret of Anjou lived this structure without deviation. She entered the diplomatic market before she understood what marriage meant. At 6, she became part of a proposed alliance with England. The arrangement collapsed, but the logic behind it remained unchanged. By adolescence, she already understood that her body represented political leverage. When she finally entered England as Queen to Henry VI, she discovered the next layer of the system. She would govern the kingdom in her husband's place when his mental instability intensified. Yet the court held her entirely responsible for the consequences. The queen carried authority when convenient. She carried blame when necessary. Catherine of Aragon's experience exposes the system's contractual precision. Her marriage treaty required her to deliver a male heir within 3 years. Failure justified returning her to Spain. The terms mirrored trade agreements more than family alliances. When Arthur died and Catherine married Henry VIII, the core expectation did not change. She needed to produce a son. Her inability to do so became a legal and political tool. Henry's push for annulment functioned as a test of national obedience, not a personal conflict. The state reshaped its religious identity because a queen's reproductive output fell short of a dynastic requirement. Once a queen entered her husband's territory, surveillance replaced negotiation. This transition was automatic. The palace was built to observe. Ladies-in-waiting were not companions. They were instruments. They monitored schedules, emotional shifts, health changes, and private conversations. Their reports moved steadily through court channels. A queen's room was never empty. Her bed was never unguarded. Her letters never private. Her silence never unrecorded. Mary Stuart encountered this structure immediately. Her husband embedded informants inside her residence. Every letter she sent was intercepted. Every advisor she met was questioned. Even her emotional reactions were analyzed for political risk. Nothing about her status protected her. Her crown did not grant autonomy. It made her the most valuable prisoner within her own walls. If you're still watching, you're the core audience this channel is built for. And this is only the first layer of how royal marriage functioned. The next layer goes deeper, and it is far more violent. You hear the shift before you feel the danger. A door closes too quietly. Footsteps stop too soon. The temperature in the chamber drops. Fabric brushes against stone in a controlled pattern. Light from the corridor narrows. That is how surveillance announces itself. Not with noise, with precision. You are not alone. You are never alone. The system designed it that way. It treats your privacy as a national threat. You understand it quickly. Observation is not protection. It is control. A queen's life inside the palace looks rich from outside, but the interior structure functions like a managed confinement. Every room has ears. Every servant has directives. Every routine has oversight. Your ladies-in-waiting sleep near you not for comfort, but for documentation. They record your health, your cycles, your conversations, your state of mind. Their loyalty is not to you. It is to the king, to his council, and to the political factions that monitor succession risk. The closer they stand to your body, the more accurate their reports become. That is the intended effect. Mary Stuart lived inside this mechanism. Her husband, Lord Darnley, filled her residence with informants. They monitored her letters, intercepted her messages, tracked her advisors, and analyzed her reactions. Stability depended on her behavior. Suspicion depended on interpretation. Both were recorded. When Darnley grew paranoid, he escalated surveillance into violence. He murdered her secretary in front of her. The act was not a spontaneous outburst. It was a demonstration. The message was simple. Her autonomy did not exist. Her safety depended on his tolerance. Any deviation from his expectations could be reframed as treason. Under this system, treason was not action. Treason was definition. Catherine de' Medici faced similar intrusion, though shaped by different power dynamics. Her ladies-in-waiting carried information directly to Diane de Poitiers, her husband's mistress. Every detail of Catherine's private life became leverage. Her pain became entertainment. Her vulnerabilities became strategic advantages for her rivals. The court turned her daily existence into political currency. She endured this environment not because she lacked intelligence, but because the system ensured that resistance carried consequences stronger than humiliation. Physical violence existed within the same structure. It was not judged as cruelty. It was classified as order. Kings who beat their wives were described as disciplined, not unstable. Courtiers congratulated them for maintaining authority. The queen's suffering reinforced hierarchy. It reminded the court who commanded power and who embodied compliance. Abuse was not hidden. It was normalized. Henry VIII used this rationale with precision. His wives entered the palace as state assets. When they failed to produce sons or threatened his authority, he reframed their shortcomings as criminal acts. And Boleyn's bruises were not secrets. Catherine Howard's injuries were not anomalies. The system treated domestic violence as management. The court accepted this without hesitation. When Henry ordered executions, he did so through legal structures designed to validate his choices. The accusations lacked foundation, but the process was followed. In this system, accuracy mattered less than obedience. Ivan IV of Russia amplified this model. His wives died under circumstances that mirrored interrogation techniques rather than marital conflict. Their injuries were documented, ignored, or justified. Whenever they attempted to resist, they were accused of rebellion against divine order. That accusation carried the same weight as treason. Under this logic, a queen's attempt to survive could be classified as a threat to the state. Pregnancy added another layer of danger. The palace viewed childbirth through a single metric. The heir must live. The mother was secondary. Medical practices reflected this priority. Instruments were designed to extract the infant. The mother's survival was a variable. Queens entered pregnancy knowing the system favored the child's survival over their own. Their deaths were not accidents. They were acceptable outcomes. This was not an exception. It was the standard. If you're still watching, you understand how deep this structure runs. You hear the low murmur first. Physicians speaking in guarded tones behind a wooden door. Their voices stay calm, almost detached. The room is warm, too warm, because the windows stay sealed to block drafts. The mattress beneath you feels uneven. The fabric sticks to your skin. Light comes from a cluster of candles, not the sun. It flickers in a way that makes shadows move across the walls. You understand the situation before anyone explains it. You are in labor. And the priority in this room is not you. For a queen, pregnancy is not a family event. It is a state procedure. The palace treats your body as a site for dynastic production. The physicians are not here to safeguard your life. Their duty is to ensure the heir survives. Every decision flows from that expectation. If complications arise, the solution is predetermined. The child must live. The mother can be replaced. The monarchy cannot. Jane Seymour's experience shows the system without disguise. When her labor stalled, Henry VIII's physicians made a choice rooted in protocol, not compassion. They cut her open while she was still alive. No anesthesia existed. No attempt to preserve her life took priority. The goal was clear: deliver the infant. Secure the succession. Jane survived long enough to hold her son. 12 days later, infection ended her life. The court celebrated the heir while ignoring the cost. This was not negligence. It was compliance with the ruler's directive. Henry had specifically ordered the survival of the child over the mother. Jane's death was intentional by design. Other queens faced the same system with different outcomes. Mary de' Medici survived 6 pregnancies, but the damage accumulated. By her 5th childbirth, she could barely walk without assistance. Her 6th left her partially paralyzed. Each pregnancy increased her political value but reduced her physical capacity. The court documented the infants. It did not document the injuries. The system recorded what mattered most to the monarchy. The heir existed. The queen continued only as long as she remained useful. Medical tools reflected the priorities of the period. Forceps, hooks, and blades were crafted for extraction. They were designed to remove the child even when the process endangered or destroyed the mother. These instruments were used not as last measures, but as standard options. A queen entered childbirth knowing that her body was expendable in service of lineage. Failure to produce sons carried penalties that extended beyond the delivery room. A queen who gave birth to daughters was labeled inadequate. A queen who miscarried risked being blamed for political instability. A queen who remained childless faced annulment, exile, or execution. The system did not treat these outcomes as tragedies. It treated them as administrative resolutions. And of Cleves survived this danger only because Henry VIII found her unattractive. His disinterest prevented consummation. That lack of intimacy protected her from the lethal expectations that destroyed other women. Her survival demonstrates how arbitrary the system could be. A queen might live not because of strength or strategy, but because the king found her unappealing. In the structure of royal marriage, safety was accidental. Risk was constant. Physical danger, however, was only part of the equation. When a queen failed to meet reproductive expectations, the system escalated to public consequence. Execution served both punishment and demonstration. It warned every noble family that the monarchy controlled female bodies and lives without limitation. These executions were engineered events. They followed schedules. They included crowds. They required speeches. They reinforced authority through spectacle. And Boleyn's death remains one of the clearest examples. The accusations against her lacked evidence. The charges were fabricated. But her failure to produce a son, combined with her refusal to remain silent in political disputes, was enough. The system required an outcome that re-established the king's dominance. Execution provided that outcome. The process was not emotional. It was procedural. If you're still watching, you're absorbing how the machinery functioned beneath the royal surface. You hear the crowd long before you reach the courtyard. The noise is controlled, not chaotic. A restless hum shaped by expectation. The air is cold. It settles against your skin in a way that feels deliberate. The wooden boards beneath your feet feel uneven, worn by repeated use. Light sharpens as you step into the open space. The scaffold waits. There is no confusion about the purpose of this platform. It exists to display consequence. You understand your place inside this structure. Queens do not simply fall from power. They are removed as examples. Public execution functions as a political instrument. It reinforces hierarchy. It stabilizes authority. It communicates loyalty standards to the nobility and to the population. A queen's death, staged with ritual and observers, signals that no rank shields a woman from the monarchy's expectations. It is not personal. It is systemic. And Bullen walked this path knowing the outcome. Her charges were fabricated. The court recognized the inconsistencies, yet followed the process. The accusations served political goals. They reframed her failure to produce a son as treason. The trial functioned as validation for a decision already made. On the day of her execution, she wore gray. Witnesses shouted insults. She delivered a speech that praised the king, because protocol required public submission. Even in death, she enacted loyalty. The system demanded that final compliance. Her life ended not because of guilt, but because elimination reaffirmed the king's authority. Catherine Howard's fate followed similar logic with a harsher edge. She was 19. Her past relationships were reframed as manipulation. Henry VIII altered the law to justify her execution. The system adapted itself to support the outcome. She was so frightened on the day of her death that she could not walk. They carried her to the block. She recited lines prepared for her. Her voice proved obedience even as the sentence proved expendability. The system treated her fear as irrelevant. Compliance mattered more than suffering. Not all queens met their end in public. Some died without spectators. Poison, drowning, and sudden disappearance appear repeatedly in historical accounts. These methods avoided scandal. They preserved appearances. They allowed monarchies to eliminate women whose existence threatened alliances or succession without drawing attention to internal instability. Records from these periods show patterns of unexplained deaths among royal wives. The official explanations emphasize illness. The injuries, however, suggest other causes. Mary Stuart's case demonstrates a different type of elimination. She lived 18 years under controlled captivity. The confinement aimed to erode her capacity to influence politics. She faced continuous interrogation, strict isolation, and limited contact with her children. By the time her execution was ordered, her physical strength had deteriorated. She needed help climbing the scaffold. The executioner required 3 swings to complete the task. The audience watched each strike in silence. The event was not hidden. It functioned as a lesson. It demonstrated that even a crowned queen could be neutralized when her existence challenged the ruling order. Spectacle maintained the monarchy's control by shaping perception. Families brought children to executions. They treated these events as instruction. The message reached every household. A queen who failed to meet expectations or who posed political risk could be removed through ritual, law, or force. No status granted immunity. These displays served another purpose. They warned current queens. They established the boundaries of acceptable behavior. They reminded them that their lives depended on compliance, production of heirs, and political silence. A queen did not survive because she was cherished. She survived because she remained useful. If you're still watching, you're following how each layer reinforces the next. You hear whispers before you see faces. Soft exchanges between advisors. Controlled tones. No emotion. The chamber feels colder than usual. Thick rugs don't change the temperature. The chair beneath you feels rigid. The light is dim enough to hide expressions, but bright enough to study reactions. You recognize the pattern. These are not social conversations. These are evaluations. They happen whenever a queen survives longer than expected. The system recalculates her value. It measures risk. It measures usefulness. It measures obedience. The message is silent but clear. Survival requires adaptation. The queens who lived long enough to influence policy did not rely on affection or security. They relied on calculation. The same structure that crushed many forced others to evolve. Catherine de' Medici adapted to this reality with precision. Her early years in the French court exposed her to displacement, humiliation, and the constant presence of rivals. She learned quickly that softness increased danger. When she became queen mother, she used intelligence networks, political manipulation, and targeted force to protect her children and maintain her position. These actions did not emerge from inherent ruthlessness. They emerged from necessity. The system incentivized strategies that ensured continuity, even when those strategies carried moral consequences. Her use of informants mirrored the surveillance that once controlled her. She appropriated the mechanism. Her intelligence network monitored nobles, foreign agents, and even members of her own family. She redirected the system's tools. Poison, rumored or real, became a symbol of her approach. Assassins acted on her behalf. Factional manipulation shaped the direction of France during years of instability. Contemporary accounts labeled her dangerous. The structure that confined her had taught her that danger was required for survival. Elizabeth I chose a different route. She avoided marriage entirely. She understood the system's expectations. A husband would claim authority over her decisions. His ambition could undermine her rule. His faction could destabilize the monarchy. By refusing marriage, she removed the single greatest threat to her autonomy. The decision created isolation. It forced her to rely on calculated distance in all relationships. Every advisor, every court favorite, every diplomatic contact had to be assessed for risk. Her execution of Mary Stuart reflected this logic. Personal dislike did not guide the decision. Political vulnerability did. Mary's presence offered foreign powers a legitimate alternative claimant to the English throne. That threat outweighed blood ties. Elizabeth described the outcome with visible anguish, but she followed the logic of rule. In this system, security required elimination of risk, even when that risk shared her lineage. Joanna of Castile adapted through resistance. Her refusal to bury her husband was not evidence of madness. It was strategy. She understood the political consequences of becoming a widowed queen. Nobles would attempt to control her. Foreign powers would attempt to manipulate her. Her father, and later her son, exploited rumors of instability. They used those claims to justify her confinement. Joanna recognized that the system placed her in danger the moment she lost her husband's political shield. By refusing burial, she maintained symbolic leverage. Her supposed madness protected her from forced remarriage. It limited the dynasty's ability to use her body as a diplomatic asset. Records indicate she remained aware, articulate, and rational during interrogations. Her confinement lasted 46 years not because she was unstable, but because her continued existence complicated political plans. Her strategy preserved her autonomy, but cost her freedom. These women survived not because the system supported them, but because they learned its structures. They studied the rules. They adapted to threats. They identified methods to protect themselves within boundaries shaped by male authority. Survival required constant vigilance. It required removing sentiment from decisions. It required action that preserved life at the expense of legacy. If you're still watching, this is where the final layer becomes visible. You hear the quiet first, not peace, absence, a silence shaped by exhaustion, calculation, and the long aftermath of survival. The room feels cold even with heavy fabrics on the walls. The chair beneath you is stable but uncomfortable. The light is steady, not bright, exposing every line on your face. This is what remains when strategy has replaced safety. A queen who survives reaches this stage with clarity. She understands the cost. She understands the structure. She understands that the crown protects no one. It only assigns responsibilities and risks that do not disappear with age. The final layer of royal marriage is not violence. It is transformation. Queens who lived long enough to reflect on their lives often recognized that the system reshaped them. Every decision they made responded to pressure. Every alliance depended on threat evaluation. Every loss reinforced a message. The monarchy valued them for their function, not their humanity. This realization guided their final years. Catherine de' Medici acknowledged this transformation directly. She understood that the actions she took to protect her children altered her reputation permanently. Historians describe her as ruthless. Her letters reveal something more complex. She recognized that survival required methods she would not have considered in her youth. She wrote to her daughter with a tone shaped by regret and realism. Her choices preserved her dynasty. They damaged her name. That trade defined her life. The system forced the exchange. Elizabeth I reached a different conclusion. Her decision to remain unmarried created a unique form of isolation. Without a husband, she avoided the most lethal aspects of the marital system. But independence came with political vigilance. She could never be vulnerable. She could never trust without calculation. Her advisors respected her authority, but they also feared her unpredictability. Her final years were marked by distance. She ruled alone. She died alone. Her crown granted autonomy, but removed intimacy. That was the cost of resisting the structure. Joanna of Castile faced a separate outcome. Her decision to weaponize her perceived instability preserved her autonomy, but confined her for decades. Her imprisonment reflected the monarchy's fear of a woman who refused to fit their framework. She remained rational in private correspondence. She maintained awareness of political tensions. Her resistance did not collapse. It adapted. The world labeled her insane because the system required that label. It allowed her father and son to control the monarchy without her interference. Her life demonstrates how the system classified disobedience as illness. It preferred narratives that justified female confinement. The structure shaped every queen differently, but the pattern remains consistent. They either adapted or they died. They either accepted surveillance or used it. They either complied with dynastic demands or faced formal removal. Their stories do not reveal individual failures. They reveal a system designed to restrict, monitor, and replace them. The monarchy treated queens as essential but disposable, highly visible yet powerless, central to succession but peripheral to autonomy. The contrast between external perception and internal reality defines the historical truth. Crowns displayed in museums appear elegant. They appear symbolic. They appear ceremonial. In practice, they represented responsibility, confinement, and surveillance. They marked women whose daily lives involved monitoring, risk, and physical danger. The public saw wealth. The queens lived with threat. That disconnect fueled centuries of misunderstanding about royal marriage. Modern audiences often imagine queens as privileged figures. The historical record contradicts this. Their lives were structured by expectations they could not refuse. Their bodies served dynastic needs. Their choices were narrowed by political demands. Their failures, real or constructed, carried lethal consequences. They lived under conditions that demanded constant discipline. They endured scrutiny that reached into their most private moments. They survived systems that rewarded compliance and punished agency. The queens who adapted show the final truth embedded in these narratives. They were not passive figures. They were not silent victims. They developed strategies, networks, alliances, and behaviors that increased their chances of survival. But survival came at a cost. It required abandoning ideals. It required accepting danger. It required understanding that the crown did not elevate them. It constrained them. This is the reality behind the ceremonial images. A system that valued lineage over life. A structure that measured worth through sons, obedience, and silence. A framework that punished deviation and rewarded conformity. When you examine the lives of these queens through forensic clarity, one conclusion becomes unavoidable. Royal marriage did not protect women. It endangered them. It conditioned their existence. It shaped their identities. It defined their limits. If you're still watching, you've followed this history to its final point. Tell me in the comments which queen's story you want explored next.